Hey there, I'm Duff here with Nerds Gaming Inc. Today I'm here with a mini deck tech for a new list that I've built that I'm really excited about. So our commander for this deck is going to be Gavi Warden. Gavi is a cycling / draw 2 commander from one of the Ikoria precons. She costs 2 and a Jeskai, so that's a white, blue, red, 5 mana total for a 2/5 human shaman that says you may pay 0 rather than pay the cycling cost for the first card you cycle each turn. She also says whenever you draw your second card each turn, create a 2/2 red and white dinosaur cat creature token, and she comes with some really cute tokens. One of the really cool things about this deck is that it's a Cid Timeless Artificer deck. So Cid is one of those cards that says you may have any number of copies of this card in your deck. So it gets around the Singleton nature of Commander and allows us to run 31 copies of him. In addition to that text, Cid also says artifact, creatures, and heroes you control get +1/+1 for each Artificer you control and each Artificer card in your graveyard. On top of that, he has cycling, which means you can discard him to draw a card, and the cycling cost for Cid is Azorius. Or, if we have Gavi on the field, the cycling cost is going to be 0, at least once a turn. So, Gavi does 3 things that Cid really cares about. The first one is she's going to allow us to put a bunch of copies of Cid into our graveyard for free. That cycling ability for 0 is going to allow us to put 1 Cid a turn. That's going to be 4 each turn cycle, because 1 on your turn and then 1 on each of your opponent's turns, directly into our graveyard. The second thing she does is build up a lot of card velocity for us. While we are putting Cid into our graveyard, we are also, of course, drawing cards. So it will really help us dig quickly through our deck and find the pieces we need to make the deck function. Cid decks tend to require a lot of pretty specific pieces, so having this sort of free cycling to really help us dig through our deck quickly is going to be a big deal. Gavi also helps us generate a bunch of tokens, right? We talked about our dinosaur cat tokens earlier, and those tokens are going to be a lovely little army for us that's eventually going to get pumped up by Cid's buff ability. So our plan is to get Gavi onto the field as soon as possible. Okay, we've got lots of great ramp options to help us get there. And then ideally, by the time Gavi hits the field, she is a 5 mana commander, so it's probably going to take a few turns. And ideally by that point, we've also established some kind of piece that's going to allow us to guaranteed draw 2 cards each turn. Some of my favorites for this are Athera, God of the Polis, which draws you a card on your upkeep, as long as you've had a creature enter the battlefield on your last turn. So if you have Athera trigger, then cycle, you will draw a card. You will have drawn 2 cards and created a cat, which will trigger Athera for your next turn, meaning that you can cycle again and will have drawn 2 cards, right? So you're guaranteed 2 cards each turn and a cat every turn as long as you have a card to cycle. There's also Riel the Everwise, who when you discard for the first time each turn allows you to draw that many cards. So we're really only ever going to draw 1 card with Riel, but with the card that we're already drawing from cycling, that will be 2 cards a turn, and again another free dinosaur. And then I also really like Monument to Endurance, which sort of does the same thing as Riel, where when you discard a card, you're able to draw a card only once a turn. However, after you've done that, if you are continuing to cycle or discard for some other reason, although hopefully we're not doing that, you can also ramp a bit by creating a treasure. All of these cards, and there's several others in the deck as well, are going to allow us to kind of fly through our deck and convert the cycling that Gavi gives us to actual card advantage, which is a pretty big deal, as well as guaranteeing that we're creating some of those lovely cat dinosaurs and massively increasing our likelihood of drawing into more Cids and giving us more fuel for our sort of cycling engine. Our next step is to cycle Cid as many times as possible. We want to get as many copies of Cid as we can into our graveyard so that we can get that big buff when we manage to get it turned on later. So again, you can cycle up Cid for free up to 4 times a turn cycle as long as you have enough copies of him in hand or draw into him, which is why we're running so many copies of Cid. And there are a few other cycling cards as well that will kind of bridge the gaps when you run out of Cids. Now, once we've got enough Cids in our graveyard, you don't want to hold off too long because of course your opponents will be progressing their game plans as well. But once we are at a place where we are stocked up on Cid, it's time to cast a copy of Cid. He has to be on the battlefield for his buff to take effect. And we also need some kind of card to transform all of our creatures into either artifacts or heroes, because those are the two things that Cid will buff. So we have cards like Encroaching Mycosynth, which turns every permanent you control into an artifact. We also have cards like Arcane Adaptation, which is an enchantment which, when it enters the battlefield, allows you to choose a creature type and turn all of your creatures into that creature type. One of the best cards in this slot is going to be Maskwood Nexus, which does sort of the Arcane Adaptation thing. It will turn all of your creatures into heroes, which is the creature type that Cid buffs. But on top of that, it will also turn them into artificers, which allows them to contribute to the buff. Pretty cool. And then our last step is just to take our creatures that we've made huge and attack with them. So in terms of like power level bracket, I've built this deck to be in bracket 3. It's got a relatively powerful and very linear game plan. However, we also have a lot of pieces that we need to find to make it work, and some of those pieces are pretty easy to remove, which can be a problem. We're also really low on interaction because we needed so much space for all these specific pieces that Cid needs to function, as well as a lot of ramp to get out our 5 mana commander. So that's kind of a limit on the power level as well. If you wanted to pump up the power level of this deck, you could do so by increasing the amount of interaction, running more high quality efficient removal, probably taking advantage of your access to blue and some of the powerful counter spells there. Tutors, this deck would really love, for example, an Enlightened Tutor to find a lot of the pieces that really get Cid going, or that really get Gavi going, frankly, with a Monument to Endurance or a Nefera. And also there are some more efficient card advantage engines that you could be running. Things like, of course, Rhystic Study, I suppose possibly the One Ring, that kind of stuff. However, I would say this plan, the Cid plan, seems a little too cute for bracket 4 to me. I think if you wanted to really build Gavi to be bracket 4, you probably could. I don't know that that would be a Cid deck. And Gavi, I think, unfortunately, as much as it hurts me to say, it definitely does not have a place in bracket 5. Bracket 2 is certainly more of an option than bracket 5, and probably more practical than bracket 4. The reason why I built the deck in bracket 3 was because I wanted access to some of the really high quality ramp options that having some game changers gives you, because I really wanted to be able to get Gavi out as soon as possible. So I think we're looking at Ancient Tomb, Chrome Mox, and Mox Diamond as our sort of fast mana premium ramp options for my build this deck. If you wanted to build a bit more of a budget version of the deck, I say, having just mentioned Mox Diamond, there's definitely lots of options for that. I would start by taking a look at the mana base, consider removing dual lands, and depending on your budget, maybe even the shocks and fetches, and speccing into instead perhaps the pain lands, which are those ones that deal 1 damage anytime you add a colored mana from them, but can tap for colorless for free. Or like the check lands that enter tapped unless you control land with the basic land type that corresponds to one of their colors. Or like Battle Bond lands, which enter untapped if you have 2 or more opponents. Those are going to be some of your best options for untapped lands. I would always advise to steer as much as you can towards untapped lands in any commander deck that you're building. And then another budget consideration, take a look at the game changers and consider making some adjustments there. Again, I brought up Mox Diamond earlier. That's a very expensive card. Instead of running these very expensive ramp options that we've got, you could look at some cheaper artifact and enchantment tutors or card advantage engines that would still sort of help the deck have velocity, still help the deck move pretty well, but would be a little bit more on the budget friendly side. Or of course, just lowering the power level or the bracket level down to bracket 2 and removing game changers entirely. If you're interested in more from me, from this deck, or from the Nerd Project, we'll make sure that the link to the deck list is available, I suppose, in the description of this video. You can tune into future gameplay at the Nerd Project YouTube page, where hopefully we'll be seeing this deck in action in the near future. Anyways, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed, let us know. Bye.